This Friday night marks the 25th anniversary of our very first date. My name is Alicia Walker, and I've recently turned 45. I've decided it's time to make some significant changes in my life. I've been married to Bill Walker for just over 20 years. Before tying the knot, we dated for 5 years. Together, we have a daughter who is currently in college. Bill is the sentimental type when it comes to occasions like these. He's planned a special dinner for us at our favorite restaurant. Unfortunately, an unimaginable and devastating surprise awaits him. I still care deeply for Bill. The early years of our marriage were truly wonderful, and I believed without a doubt that we would spend the rest of our lives together. Life wasn't without challenges. We both worked hard and shared household responsibilities, especially after our daughter Elizabeth was born. Bill, however, insisted I leave my job until Elizabeth was old enough to attend school. When I finally returned to work, our focus shifted to saving for Elizabeth's college education and securing our retirement. Over time, our financial situation flourished thanks to salary increases, promotions, Bill's smart financial decisions, and inheritances from our late parents. I've always stood by Bill and supported him, even during minor disagreements. We never really fought. Our relationship remained intimate, and I often received attention from men, both at work and during social events. Despite this, I never once entertained the idea of being unfaithful. It simply wasn't something I wanted. Bill was everything I needed, or so I thought. However, I now realize my feelings have been conflicted. Publicly, I've condemned infidelity, yet I've always been intrigued by the details of others' illicit affairs. I've heard stories about women experiencing empty nest syndrome, how they're said to undergo drastic personality changes, becoming either nuns or cheaters. I thought it was nonsense. To me, Elizabeth leaving for college seemed like an opportunity to strengthen my marriage with Bill. Elizabeth had been largely independent even before leaving home, and we had already grown accustomed to life as a couple. I saw no reason to make any changes. But over time, I began to reflect on myself. I wondered whether men still found me attractive. I decided to stand in front of a full-length mirror, completely naked. What I saw was disheartening. Where my skin was once smooth, it now wrinkled. What used to stand firm now sagged. My once flat stomach had transformed into a muffin top, and my hips had widened even more. I started paying closer attention to compliments and subtle flirtations from other men. Whether it was my perception or a decline in their interest, I wasn't sure. Determined to change, I began exercising more, applying more makeup, and dressing in ways that accentuated my best features. The compliments and attention from men increased, and I felt better about myself. Yet, it still wasn't enough. I craved something more, something thrilling, adventurous, and risky. At home, nothing had changed. Bill treated me the same way he always had, even after Elizabeth left. He still gave me compliments, remembered birthdays and anniversaries, and remained physically intimate with me. However, it felt repetitive, like watching reruns instead of experiencing something new. I wanted excitement, a spark of energy. I tried to introduce new ideas in the bedroom to spice things up. Bill made an effort, but it wasn't what I needed. The acts might have been different, but he remained the same. My pleasure felt artificial, and I'm certain he didn't notice. That was when I first considered the idea of seeking fulfillment elsewhere, perhaps even taking a lover. Secrecy became my top priority. If I were caught, it would destroy me, and devastate both Bill and Elizabeth. This meant no excuses about working late, no overnight business trips, no hotels, and no risky encounters at home. I realized that an office romance during work hours might be my only viable option. At work, I ruled out most of the men. Many were single and attractive, but I'd overheard their boasts about dating married women, and I couldn't trust them to keep quiet. Every day, life at home became increasingly stifling. Our routine was stagnant, and even new toys offered only temporary relief from the monotony. Then, there was Darnell, known as Darn for short. He joined the office about 6 months ago in a mid-level position. His charm and good looks drew attention from all the women, but his slight flirtations never seemed to have ulterior motives. He maintained friendly, professional interactions. Darnell began glancing at me for a little longer than necessary, locking eyes with a sly grin. My heart would race, and my body reacted instantly. Gradually, he started small conversations, asking about my husband and daughter. These exchanges were brief, discreet, and unnoticed by others. Things shifted when he invited me to join him for lunch. I recognized this as a potential turning point, though I worried about office gossip labeling us as a couple. I laughed it off and casually mentioned that I could use a little excitement in my life. Looking back, I didn't consciously mean to hint at the dissatisfaction in my life, but the words slipped out. Over time, I shared more about my family. I painted my marriage as comfortable and predictable. Eventually, I hinted at the lack of passion in my relationship with Bill. Darnell didn't need me to spell it out, he understood. One day, we found ourselves alone in the elevator. Darnell pressed the stop button and kissed me passionately. I responded without hesitation, and for those moments, nothing else mattered. When he released the button and the elevator resumed moving, he simply said, "We need to talk." I nodded, hoping I could make it to the restroom before anyone noticed my flushed state. That day, I couldn't focus on anything except our time in the elevator. Guilt lingered faintly, but it was overshadowed by anticipation. But the feeling of wanting something more overpowered my guilt. Darnell called and suggested I let my husband know I'd be home late that evening. I couldn't help but wonder if he intended to push our newfound intimacy further. I desperately hoped so. He came to my office and immediately made it clear that we shouldn't stay long. He made no attempt to get closer to me. Instead, we just talked. We agreed that we both desired to be intimate with each other, but we'd need to exercise extreme caution. Afterward, we both returned home, brainstorming how to meet safely. I had read stories about cheaters claiming their marriages didn't suffer since their spouses still had access to them whenever they wanted. Almost unconsciously, my feelings for Bill began to shift. I think I was trying to find faults in him to lessen my guilt. Thoughts of Darnell lingered in my mind constantly. Since the elevator encounter, minor annoyances at home, things I used to brush off, started to escalate into full-blown conflicts. I voiced my frustrations more frequently and grew irritated if Bill didn't immediately complete tasks I had asked of him, even though I knew he would eventually do them. Meanwhile, Darnell devised a plan for us to meet discreetly. He rented a small vacant office space on the floor above our building. When I asked how he could afford it, he smirked and said having a wealthy wife came with advantages. I didn't argue. The office had minimal furnishings, but it included one very important item, a large sofa draped with an easily washable throw. We wasted no time christening it. Being intimate with Darnell exceeded my expectations. He was more passionate, more fulfilling than Bill. I experienced pleasure effortlessly and frequently. Afterward, we'd bask in the euphoria, professing our love to each other. We carefully orchestrated our movements to avoid suspicion. We left at separate times, taking different routes, one of us using the stairs, the other the elevator. We never entered or exited the office together. Our meetings were irregular and sporadic, and we occasionally skipped days to lower the risk of getting caught. We thought through every possible way we could be discovered. We checked diligently for hidden cameras or recording devices both at work and at home. We avoided email entirely. Darnell even bought us specialized phones used exclusively for communication with each other. If questioned by our spouses, we'd say they were business phones. The more time I spent with Darnell, the stronger my desire for him grew. My feelings for Bill didn't disappear completely, but he no longer made me feel the way Darnell did. Bill had become like a pair of worn, comfortable slippers that you hesitate to throw away, while Darnell was an irresistible new pair of shoes I simply couldn't live without. Darnell was the first to broach the idea of us being together forever. I hadn't realized how differently I felt about Bill until Elizabeth visited. Both Bill and I were thrilled to see her. The three of us spent time reminiscing, sharing laughs and childhood memories. For a brief moment, it felt like stepping back in time. Later, Elizabeth pulled me aside and mentioned that Bill had expressed concern about my recent moodiness. She reassured me that I seemed perfectly normal to her during her visit. I agreed with her, admitting I'd been in a bit of a funk, and suggested it might just be menopause. I assured her that Bill and I had a rock-solid marriage. Lying to my daughter was painful, but I wasn't ready to reveal the truth. The next time I saw Darnell, I told him that Bill was starting to worry about me. I said we needed to accelerate our plans. What we ultimately decided on was undeniably cruel to Bill and Mary Alice, but by this point, we were already cheating. What difference did it make? We agreed to take as much money as we could and disappear together. Both of our spouses had access to substantial wealth, Bill through his job and Mary Alice through her family, so we figured neither of them would be financially strained for long. Darnell had no qualms about taking money from Mary Alice's family since he'd never liked them anyway. Meanwhile, I rationalized stealing from Bill by convincing myself he didn't treat me well enough to deserve my loyalty. However, my attempts to provoke him into acting poorly failed miserably. Instead, I focused on planning my escape with Darnell, fantasizing about the freedom we'd have together. That Friday, I called the restaurant and confirmed Bill's reservation for 6 p.m. At 3:30, I went to the bank, intending to withdraw all the money from our joint accounts. When I handed the teller my ID, she hesitated, a puzzled look crossing her face. "I believe you and your husband may have miscommunicated," she said. "He was here earlier today and already withdrew nearly all the funds." She explained that whenever such a large sum is withdrawn, they're required to ask why. According to the computer entry, Bill claimed he was worried about a potential stock market crash and wanted to keep the cash on hand. She added that he was adamant despite their assurances about the money's safety. I was stunned. When I inquired about our safe deposit box, the teller directed me to a man near the elevators. After signing in, I noticed Bill's signature in the log a few names ahead of mine. Either he had stashed the money there, or he'd beaten me to it. I opened the box with trembling hands, my heart pounding. Inside was only a letter. As I unfolded it, dread filled me. The letter began. "If you're reading this, Alicia, you already know I'm ahead of you." By now, Darnell must have discovered the same thing. "Mary Alice and I started planning the moment we uncovered your affair.